Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the opening of Farthing Bridge, near Halfpenny Halt. God bless her and all who sail in her.
I think we're just in time at Halfpenny Halt to see Admiral Dickie Bird bringing a heavy freight through. Oh, I think we're struggling with this weight. I think there's a roof missing off the top of the van. Oh well. And a couple more views perhaps from the hillside across the way. Good view of Farthing Bridge though. And I think one more time before we lighten the load. Olive is definitely struggling with this. Well, Rosie's definitely running better with a lighter load. Less shoveling for Admiral Dickie Bird as well. This is how I built the coke wagon that you see running on the heavy freight, starting with Small Book Studios, their wagon coach chassis, and in that you get the set of instructions, which I pretty much followed to the letter. A couple of axle boxes, the wheels, the buffers, I suppose some of the brass pieces, the two buffer beams and the actual base plate. And I pretty much assembled that, as I said, to the letter, and ended up with one of their chassis kits. I don't know if you can see, I've got a I put an extra couple of holes in the bottom to attach the body of the wagon, and these are a couple of half ounce wheel weights, which are self-adhesive, although I have stuck these in, and this is what I end up with before pre-painting. And I'll just move this aside, and this was my sort of first little attempt. Nothing wrong with it. It's sort of where I wanted to go with the Coke wagon, but it's actually a bit too normal and just a box. So I'm going to show you some of what I did to adjust it to make it what you see on the heavy freight. So this was the first wagon I built, and I sort of like the more TippY Ashwood ends on this, and again there's a small Brooks kit with a couple of the half ounce weights, a couple of extra screws put in, and some added detail. So I thought I'd keep with the same diagram on the Coke wagon and a 3-plank wagon. Funny enough. So I kept with the 3 planks, which I'll just show you, are basically a tongue depressor and lollipop sticks and coffee stirrers, cardboard for the metal ending, but I'm going to actually just literally take this back apart. This was just PVA and a reasonable quality wood glue, and nope, it's not going to come apart without a blade in there. So I'll show you how I got to this. So with the box disassembled, I'm actually keeping the side panels with the doors. I start with this floor, and yep, it's not meant to be even or straight by any stretch of the imagination. It is TippY Ashwood after all. And what I'm going to try and do is actually just replace the ends with the same design that I have on this. And if I just put these aside, I'll basically show you what they are. You can buy boxes of coffee stirrers, tongue depressors, lollipop sticks, you name it, in any quantity you want if you look around on eBay. And we're just setting up something as simple as this with a little oh, that was a little bent, won't use that one. Little PVA, and I think you can see that almost immediately, that you have one side or one end of that truck. And I was thinking I'd bring the Coke rail round using the cardboard again as metal, and rather than going the full distance across, we do something like that, just a single row, and that would give it a little bit more of a TippY Ashwood feel. So let's glue a couple ends together. So with the end pieces gluing, I use a little bit of wax paper just so it doesn't stick everywhere. We move on to the metal sides of the wagon here, these are basically just cardboard stock and 5mm lines, cut them into strips like so, and bend them to form a little angle, and that's as simple as that, and that will create these end strips, and I'll detail them a little bit more as we go along. So taking one of the ends, grab our glue, quick smear inside of there, make sure it's spread nice. Nice thing about PVA is doesn't really matter how far and where it goes, easy to get off everything. And just attach cardboard to the end there. Taking one of the side panels, a little dab, and again, one of the things that suits my model making, none of this is really supposed to be particularly straight or equal. I'm going to turn that around because there's a little bit of a lip on the top of that one which I quite like to be upwards. Hold that there for a second. Choose our side. Go with that for this one. And because they're only lollipop sticks, bits of cardboard, to level things out to fit the chassis and the rail, you can just quickly run sandpaper when they're dry over a bottom edge on a flat surface to give you the necessary flatness you want in any particular plane to mount it. And there we sort of have one end together. So we'll just glue the other end to the base. And we're back to get into some resemblance of the wagon. There's our doors and our coke rails to go on the side there, but we'll come back to that when that's all dried a little bit solid. So some with the coke rails added there, as you can see. I'll just put the last one in here. Again, just PVA on the cardboard. You can see I've made a mistake with the length of the cardboard, which I hadn't realised until I tried to get the rails reasonably straight. But that is actually fairly easy to solve. If I can get my little fat finger in there. Oh, that looks like that's the wrong length. No, we can squeeze that in. There we go. No, I think we'll just give that a little cut there, a little bit shorter. So you can see it. I don't want to paint to obscure. So yeah, as I said, we got a little cardboard too much over there. Bit of bad measuring. It's meant to be a bit rough and ready, but not that rough and ready. So I usually let this sit for a while and set up, and then actually a little PVA or a wood glue and water wash with a little bit of dish soap in it. Because it's all wood and cardboard, if you just slosh it around all the little gaps and everything like that, it will soak in and it will be pretty solid after that. And then we'll go back to attaching the doors. I'll show you that works, and move on with some detailing. So we've stuck the doors on, and now it's time for a little bit of detailing. And it's what you find around and just a little bit of imagination. One of my craft stores has these things for scrapbooking. Hang on, let me get a bit of white paper. They are, I think they're called clock handles, and they're just a range of basically clock looking handles. And I use these smaller ones here, and I've bent those and used those as hinge clasps and all sorts of bracketry on all sorts of things. Let's put those back in there. But out of that selection we've got, I pick, I don't know if you can really see those, those shape, which is the same as I used on the wagon here, which is a bit dark, I think. Let me just move a bit of lighting here. And we're trying to make this door fall down. So obviously we need some hinges, so just a couple of bits of wire and some small split pins which make the actual hinges. And all I do is simply take one of these clock hands, and I don't know if you can see that, maybe there's a little hole right at the end. Of course that's the wrong way around. Pair of pliers, we just twist that to give us a little hinge. Probably should have done this earlier, but it's basically just showing you imagination. Just look at everything with a different eye. So you thread two of these onto the wire, thread two of the split pins, which you can barely see on camera. Actually, one of the beauties of working in this GN15 scale is that you seriously can get your fingers involved in everything. And I've previously drilled just two little holes underneath the door, and lay everything out, and hopefully the holes are deep enough. And in goes one side. In goes the other side. Oh, holes aren't quite deep enough. space these apart, I'll have to re-drill those holes just a little deeper. And you sort of get the idea for a little bit of detail for the door hinge, for the side there. And once you've got everything laid out where you want it, little dab of super glue on the whole assembly, hinges, split pins, down into the wood, and on the fancy bracketry as well. I use these small tubes of super glue. You can buy 3 or 4 in a pack for not very much. I'd rather use those. A lot of the other stuff seems to, the bigger tubes, if they go off, you end up throwing the whole thing away. Just like that. And you end up with an actual functioning door. If you really wanted it to function, you could do that. So now we have to have a bar or something across it to hold it closed. And like so. So I'll just show you how I do that. Now I looked everywhere for little flat pieces of metal. And I was actually looking for some lamp iron brackets. And I came up with this. Simple as this. These are staples. Huh. For a staple gun. Different sizes. Just run your blade down them. And you get one individual staple. You find yourself a set of cutters. And quick snip in half. Oh. And you immediately have little L brackets, which are perfect. So what I decided to do was put the longer side in first and then snip them when they're inside, so that the outside is always the same height. I don't have to start measuring around with that. Simple piece of cardboard. And let's mark this one. Just a rough piece of cardboard there. A little dab of glue on that just to hold it in the right sort of place. Temporarily, if not, and then semi-permanent. Stick it across the door and throw the little 2L brackets into 2 holes. Just like so. And again, little spotty super glue, crazy glue. I think the catch is not the tripod. And you've got a perfectly acceptable bar, which again, all in theory, and that's my sort of main thing, is that would work. Some guy would take the bar off, that would allow the door to hinge, and it would hinge down onto the platform. So one of the last details that you put on, or I put on, is the coach bolts, or rivets, or whatever, but something's got to bolt that metal to those woods in the framing, as you can see, and they're basically just pin heads. And there is a million different pins. I'm dressmakers. They've got little ends on. I don't know if you can see that, little baubles on the end. Push pins, some of the bigger push pins, I've got some of those. And you can see on this, I think if I can get a close up here, these are the clock handles I was using earlier, and I've put pin heads through the holes to actually make rivets or coach bolts through the actual hinges. Now, there's a lot of holes to do, so I stuck my pin vise in the end of my drill, and away you go. And just continue on with the holes. So once you've got those holes drilled, it's just a case of putting dress pins in. Now I like the dress pins, they seem to be about the right size for the head. Oh, I haven't drilled that one deep enough. And with any craft store or hobby store that you go in, don't be frightened to look around. In any section there's always things, fittings that you can use, buttons, fastenings, you name it. So we can go these pins, and then I'll just put a little drop of super glue on each one of these. That gives us a nicely TippY Ashwood detailed wagon, which we quite like. There's a couple of extra little things I'm going to put on. I'll show you on the brick wagon that I did. Probably going to put some sort of bracket like this on the ends, and of course the little bauble pins on the top. I'll also show you how I do my couplings. But I think the next thing is to send the chassis and my little coat wagon body off to paint. Another day perhaps. So we let everything dry, and a day or so later with a little bit of a rattle can, just a satin black. I'm not really bothered if it covers that well. I'm not sure if you can see the linkage on the print here. This is how I sort of attach everything together. It's not a very good, it's not that print, so you get that bit. And all that basically is a split pin on a little bit of chain, and I have a bigger link at one end and then 3 links. Just open up the last link. I think these came from the jewellery supply. I think that's all they are. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's a little small ring. One of those in the end. Gives me a sort of 3-link looking coupling. And press that together. And we have a hole. I think there's split pin rather. Goes from the underneath. Okay. Give it a squish. turn it around so the longer side of the R-pin is sticking outwards. I don't know if you can sort of see that. Pretty sure. Let me just try and move the light a bit here. Probably not the best light to see there. Fold the R-pin down. And actually just make a little hook on the end that the link can just, on the opposing truck, can just go against. Quick snip of the other bit. Get in there. And fold that down. So it won't come out. We have sort of a 3-link coupling thing. The box has been drying for a couple of days, so that will fit on there. Screw that in, and we're just ready for a bit of coat of paint. I did do a little bit of an extra bracket on this end. Again, that's just the cardboard and a couple of pinheads. Let's go to paint. Well, a nice sunny morning. Coat of paint on the wagon last night. I'd love to tell you how I weather wagons and give you a little paint tutorial, but in honest truth, I really don't know. It's a mixture of dry brushing and just black and grey washes as I see sort of appropriate. Just using cheap acrylics, basically. But you do have to start with one thing, and you have to start with pretty much a new truck. So I painted this last night. As you can see, it's a nice sunny morning here, so perfect start. And obviously this is a coke truck, so I haven't got a load yet. Most of the inners are going to be sort of coke, so I have a reasonably stiff brush and put some black on that. And I think everybody knows these dry brushing techniques. By now you take as much off as possible and just start going to town, obviously, where, you know, coke and everything would have been on the rails and banged up. Just dull it all down. It is a bit of a bright yellow. And the main coat, the yellow, that I've used was a little watery last night. By using the sticks and the tongue depressors as the wood, it's allowed some of the grain to sort of stay proud. So when you dry brush, that's the very detail that you pick up, which is that wood grain. And you know, just away you go with it. Even some of the edges on the ironwork, I've not been really that bothered about getting into all the edges, because this will certainly dirty things up. I think you can see a little bit of that starting up. When you get into a wash, the wash will come into here, and there's some browns. I have no idea. It's just what I do. I did think on this side though, I might add some new repairs, like a new plank or something like that that's been added in afterwards. By the time this is all grubby we'll try and keep one of those planks new, maybe the door or this framing down here. I think I'm going to go for this framing down here. So again, it's just a little mix of paints. Beauty of acrylics, you can sort of come up with these nice sort of browns. It's just meant to represent a piece of wood or something that's been replaced. And just neatly bring that in. A little bit of black here, just a little touch, and give it a little bit of new grain or something if you can wash that out. And we'll just see what it looks like. It's only little bits of wood and cheap acrylic, so you can just paint all that again if you really want to. So once you've got a little bit of dry brushing with the black, might be a bit too much sun, then it's time for a little bit of a wet wash. Just the whole idea of putting a really inky black in, and honestly most of the time I just use what's left in my little jar of washes, adding in a little bit of brown or something as I go. So with a fairly heavy black wash, as you can see over the truck, we're going to turn our attention to highlighting some of the pinheads, which are the bolts or rivets. And that's just a very thin brown, rusty sort of colour washed onto a few. And we're going to dry brush in the chassis with a similar sort of brown. And as you can see, I'm not frightened to weather it up. The only clean coal trucks I think I've ever seen are Preserve Railways. So that just leaves one little last technique, and that's basically a white dry brushing, and with a little bit of silver in, and that'll pick all the coach bolts and the rivet detail up. And then we're sort of done. Now I must admit, it's not often that Lord Ashwood comes down to the workshop to have a look at the work. Bob doesn't seem to be around at the moment. Not 100% happy with this yet. I'll probably mess around with it even more. Let me just spin it around so you can see the other side. But it's TippY Ashwoodish, and I sort of like it. Anyway, thanks for watching.